If you've ever assumed a VA offer is the weaker offer on the table, the numbers usually say otherwise. I've sat on both sides of the transaction, which is part of why this one bothers me more than most real estate myths. Most sellers don't reject VA offers because they ran the numbers. They reject them because of something they heard about the down payment, about the appraisal, about a closing that dragged on for somebody's cousin 5 years ago. None of these reasons hold up against the current data. I am Tim Lockhart, realtor with Keller Williams here in Wichita Falls and also a retired Air Force officer. I've PCS'd more times than I can count on one hand and bought and sold homes using VA financing during PCS moves while I was active duty. And now I sit on the other side of the table helping sellers near Shepherd Air Force Base evaluate offers on their actual merits. Almost every time a seller pushes back on a VA buyer, it traces back to one of three things: the down payment, the appraisal, or a bad experience years ago with a lender who didn't know what they were doing. I'm going to walk you through each one with real numbers, so by the end of this, you've got a clear way to evaluate any offer that lands on your desk, a VA or otherwise. Before I get to the breakdown, if Shepherd Air Force Base buyer pool is part of why you're selling, or you're weighing a VA offer right now, I can run the numbers on your specific situation. Here's a link below to check your home's value and start that conversation. Now, let's get into it. Let's start with the part that matters most. For most sellers, a VA buyer's financing has zero effect on your net proceeds. The loan type changes how the buyer pays for the house. It doesn't change what lands in your account at closing. The confusion almost always starts with the phrase zero down. That phrase makes people picture a buyer who's stretched thin, and in practice, it's often the opposite. A VA buyer who isn't putting money down frequently has more cash sitting in reserves than a conventional buyer who just spent $17,500 on a 5% down payment for a $350,000 home. The VA buyer isn't weaker. They're choosing to keep their cash rather than tie it up at closing. And the VA guarantee is exactly what lets the lender approve that structure without taking more risk. So let's deal with the first objection directly. Does putting nothing down make a buyer risky? No, and here's why. The federal guarantee behind a VA loan is what protects the lender, so the lender doesn't need the buyer's own cash as a cushion the way a conventional loan requires. That's the entire mechanism. It's not a workaround, it's the design. VA loans also drop the monthly private mortgage insurance, or PMI, completely. On that same $350,000 example, a conventional buyer at 5% down is paying around $175 a month in mortgage insurance on top of their payment. A VA buyer isn't paying that at all. That's a stronger debt-to-income picture every single month of the loan, which means less chance that the buyer runs into financial trouble somewhere between contract and closing. There is a funding fee built into the loan instead, typically a couple points rolled into the loan amount rather than paid out of pocket. It's lower for buyers who put money down, and it's waived entirely for veterans with a service-connected disability. None of that touches your proceeds as the seller. It's a buyer-side cost structured into the loan, not a line item that affects what you walk away with. If you've personally received a VA offer on a home that you were selling, or you're sitting on one right now, drop a comment with what your biggest hesitation was. I want to know what's actually circulating in the market right now. The second objection, will a VA appraisal hold up closing or kill the deal outright? Not likely. Fewer than 10% of VA appraisals result in a value dispute. The property requirement is basic habitability, safe, structurally sound, sanitary. The same standard FHA uses. A dated kitchen or worn carpet on an older home isn't going to trigger a VA flag. This myth has staying power because it used to carry more truth. The VA has tightened up its process over the years, and most homes already in reasonable, livable condition move through without issue. If anything, that appraisal protects you as a seller too. It confirms a property supports a contract price before you're locked into a closing date with no way out if something falls apart later. The third and fourth objections, and I'll take them together because they usually show up in the same conversation. On timeline, a VA loan with an experienced lender closes in roughly 30 to 35 days, close enough to a conventional timeline that it shouldn't be a deciding factor. National numbers put VA around 30 to 45 days against conventional's 28 to 35 days. That's a gap measured in days, not weeks. Actually, the lender matters more here than the loan type. A lender who closes VA loans regularly knows the documentation and moves through underwriting without delays that come from unfamiliarity. That's the variable I check first when I'm advising a seller on a VA offer. On closing cost, no, you don't automatically have to cover the buyer's costs. VA limits certain fees the buyer can be charged, but it doesn't require you, the seller, to pay them. Concessions are negotiated like any other transaction. VA allows up to 4% of the purchase price towards closing cost, with a total cap of 6%. If anything above that 4% goes towards something like paying down buyer's debt rather than additional closing cost. Plenty of VA transactions close with no seller concessions at all. The structure protects the buyer from junk fees. It doesn't put an unusual burden on you. Here's why this myth has so much staying power in our market specifically. Shepherd Air Force Base drives a meaningful share of the buyer pool across Wichita Falls, Wichita County, Burke-Burnett, and Iowa Park. That means VA offers come up constantly here. And so does the old story. Somebody's closing dragged on for weeks because of appraisal back and forth 5 years ago, and that memory sticks around long after the lender or the process improved. One rough closing with an inexperienced lender isn't the same as how VA loans perform across the board today. The numbers I just walked through reflect current averages, not the exception that became somebody's go-to story. So here's the actual decision framework, and this is what I use with my own sellers. Neither loan type is automatically stronger. The strength of an offer comes from the buyer's verified income, their reserves, their lender's track record, and the specific terms written into the contract, not the financing program stamped across the top of the form. A fully underwritten VA buyer with a strong lender and solid reserves is every bit as competitive as a conventional buyer at 5% down, and in some ways more stable given the lack of PMI and the lower monthly obligation. If you're thinking, I'd still rather just go with a conventional buyer to be safe, I understand the instinct. But feels safer and is actually stronger aren't the same thing, and the only way to know the difference is to compare underwriting, reserves, lender, and terms side by side, not to sort by loan type before you've looked at anything else. And if your agent tells you to pass on a VA offer without walking you through those specifics, ask what exactly about this offer is weaker. If the answer is a generalization about VA loans instead of something specific to this buyer's numbers, that's worth a second look. So here's the bottom line. A VA offer isn't automatically the weaker offer, and a conventional offer isn't automatically the stronger one. The loan type printed on the contract is one of the least useful ways to judge an offer. What matters is the buyer's underwriting, their reserves, their lender, and the terms on the page. If you're getting ready to list near Shepherd Air Force Base or anywhere across Wichita Falls, Burke-Burnett, or Iowa Park, and you want someone who's looked at this from both sides of the table, as a VA buyer myself, and now as an agent evaluating offers for sellers, I'd be glad to walk through your situation. Schedule a no-pressure consultation using the link below, and we'll look at your home, your timeline, and exactly how to read any offer that comes in so that you're never the seller who passes on the strongest buyer by mistake.